When the stroke hit, I became a prisoner in my own body, but my mind stayed sharp. I heard my children whispering about selling my house, forging my will, and locking me away. They thought I was finished. They never saw what was coming next. When you've spent your life dealing with other people's secrets, betrayals, and regrets, as I did as a probate lawyer, you start to believe you've seen the worst in people. I thought I had. I used to sit across polished oak desks, comforting crying daughters, soothing greedy sons, and walking trembling widows through the fine print of a loved one's last wishes. I thought I knew the limits of human selfishness. I thought my own children would never be the kind of people I'd had to protect clients from. That was my first mistake. My name is Eleanor Sharp. I'm 58 years old. I used to be someone people listened to. I had a voice that mattered, one that could settle arguments in court or in the family kitchen. I lived in a large white mansion in coastal Maine, the kind of house with a name carved in stone by the driveway, Cedar Vale. My husband Martin and I bought it after 20 years of building our careers, saving every cent, dreaming of ocean air and quiet mornings. We raised our children there. Julia, my daughter, was always a force, clever, driven, often too quick with her opinions. She became a real estate agent, sharp-eyed and ambitious, with a love for modern design and luxury magazines. Michael, my son, was softer, less focused. He dabbled in startups and investments, most of which failed. But he had charm, and that carried him farther than it should have. When Martin died 8 years ago now, I thought the ground had opened under my feet. He was my best friend. We'd built everything together. But grief has a funny way of turning into habit. You learn to wake up alone, to drink your tea silently, to move on. I found peace in the familiar walls of Cedar Vale, the rhythm of ocean waves through my open windows, and the occasional laughter when Julia or Michael visited. They came less often as years passed, but that's how it goes, doesn't it? Children grow. They get busy. It happened on a Wednesday. I was getting dressed, planning to meet an old colleague for lunch, when the left side of my body gave out. I remember the mirror tilting, the sound of my perfume bottle crashing to the floor, and then, nothing. The next memory I have is of white walls, soft beeping, and the smell of antiseptic. A nurse named Carol leaned over me, kind eyes behind her glasses. "You're in the hospital, Mrs. Sharp. You've had a stroke." I couldn't speak. I tried. My tongue felt like stone. I blinked, tried to move my hand, but even that was sluggish. My mind was screaming. I was there. I understood everything. I just couldn't get out. The days blurred. Doctors came and went. They explained things to Julia and Michael while I lay there, watching. I listened. That's how I first heard it, Julia's voice, quiet but certain. "She needs full-time care," she said. "We'll look into assisted living. Somewhere with memory support." "She always said she didn't want to die in that house," Michael added. A lie. I had never said that. Cedar Vale was my home, my comfort. Martin had taken his last breath in that bedroom. I wanted to do the same someday. They didn't know I could understand. Or maybe they didn't care. I was moved to a facility 2 towns over, a clean, bright place filled with pastel walls and smells of cafeteria food. The nurses were kind, but I felt like a ghost, hovering in a life that no longer belonged to me. My hands shook, my voice came in gasps, and my mind remained sharp as glass. And that's when I learned what they'd done. Julia sat beside me one afternoon, flipping through documents on her tablet. "We met with the lawyer today," she said too cheerfully. "You had an old will, Mom, but we've updated it. It's all taken care of now." Michael chimed in from the window seat. "It's just easier this way. You won't have to worry about anything. We've got it covered." I wanted to scream. Instead, a small moan escaped my lips. Julia didn't even look up. They'd forged a new will. Claimed I wasn't of sound mind. Took everything. Cedar Vale, the savings account Martin and I had built. Even the cottage by the sea we used to escape to in summer. They thought I was locked inside my body, unaware. But they didn't know about Howard. Howard Bell was my law partner for nearly 20 years. We'd handled hundreds of estates together. Long before my stroke, I'd updated my will with him and gave him strict instructions. If anything ever seemed off, he was to follow the document I signed and stored in his care. That will didn't leave the house to Julia and Michael. It left Cedar Vale to a local orphanage. It set up scholarships, funded repairs for the community library. It honored Martin's values, not theirs. I wasn't ready to act yet. I needed to get stronger first. That's where Dr. Naomi Peters came in. She was my neurologist, a woman who listened more than she talked. She saw the spark in my eyes, the awareness behind my silence. "Don't let the quiet fool you," she told a nurse. This one's still in there. I practiced. Every day. Speech therapy, physical therapy, slow walks down fluorescent hallways. I kept quiet about what I knew. I let Julia and Michael decorate my room with fake smiles and hollow reassurances. Isn't this place nice? Julia would say. I think she likes the soup here, Michael once joked. All the while, they were preparing to sell my home. I heard them talking about buyers, prices, renovations. Julia was giddy about flipping the old place. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. I lay in bed, my fists clenched under the blanket, my lips sealed. Let them think I was done. Let them think they'd won. They'd forgotten who I was. I had taught women to protect themselves in divorce court. I'd helped widows take back land stolen by stepchildren. I had built my life defending the voiceless. Now, for the first time, I was the voiceless, and I was learning just how strong silence could be. The turning point came one night when I overheard them arguing in the hallway outside my room. Michael was yelling, low and furious. She wants to list the house at $1.5 million. That's insane. It's oceanfront, Julia hissed. Do you know how much that land alone is worth? We should have waited. Mom might live another 5 years. She won't even know what's happening. Stop whining and let me handle it. I smiled just a little. Let them fight. Revenge was coming. But not the kind that slammed doors or shouted in courtrooms. I had something quieter in mind. Something smarter. I've always believed that patience is power, especially the quiet kind. The kind that waits in the shadows, listens, gathers facts, and moves only when the time is right. That kind of patience had served me well in courtrooms, where emotion can cloud judgment. Now, lying in a borrowed bed with strangers calling me by my first name, that patience was all I had left. But I was sharpening it like a blade. Each day I got a little stronger. My speech was slow but clear. My hands, once clumsy from the stroke, could now grip a pen. Dr. Peters was pleased with my progress. You're one of the lucky ones, she said, examining my reflexes. Most people don't bounce back like this. I just nodded. I didn't want to be lucky. I wanted to be ready. The staff thought I was harmless. Julia and Michael treated me like I was furniture. They came and went, bringing flowers I didn't want and asking questions they never listened to the answers of. I hope you don't mind, Julia said during one visit, brushing imaginary lint off her designer coat. We had the big dining room repainted. That dark wood just felt so sad. It's white now. Brighter. Fresh. Michael chimed in. The buyers were talking to Love Open Concepts. We're thinking of knocking down that wall between the kitchen and the den. The den, Martin's reading room. They were going to destroy the one place in the house he loved most. They called it improvement. I called it erasure. I waited until they left before I let myself cry. Not loud sobs, just tears that fell quietly into my lap, like the rain that used to tap the windows at Cedar Vale during autumn storms. I cried not for the house, but for the realization that my children had become strangers. Or maybe they always were, and I was only just seeing it now. It was around this time that I called Howard. He'd visited me once already, early in my recovery. A quick drop-in, brief and careful, like he didn't want to upset me. But now I needed more than pleasantries. I asked the nurse for a phone. I dialed slowly, the numbers etched into my memory from years of partnership. When he answered, there was a pause before he spoke. Eleanor, he asked, cautious. I'm ready, I said. My voice cracked but held steady. You still have it? The will, he asked. Of course. It's locked in my safe. Not a soul's seen it but me. Are you sure you want to move on this now? Yes. That one word set everything into motion. Howard met me the next afternoon in the small library of the facility. We sat in a quiet corner between mystery novels and puzzles. He brought paperwork, folders, a pen I'd once gifted him engraved with Sharp and Bell. We reviewed the real will, the one I had signed before the stroke. We made a few updates, nothing major, just to reflect the current financial balances and to make sure the donations were precise. I'll handle the filings, he said. They won't know what hit them. Good, I said. Don't rush it. Let them keep digging. Meanwhile, Julia and Michael were accelerating their plans. I found out from a nurse who overheard them talking. They were preparing to list the house. An agent friend of Julia's had already taken pictures. My bedroom had been staged with bright linens and fake flowers. My office had been stripped of books and turned into a wellness room. They said the seller wants a fast closing, the nurse told me, glancing at me nervously. I didn't know if that meant you, but it did, I said. Thank you. I didn't want to sell the house. I wanted them to fall with it. They weren't smart about it either. Michael started posting cryptic updates online about their next chapter and a fresh coastal opportunity. Julia flaunted her designer handbags and took a vacation to Cabo while supposedly dealing with my care decisions. They believed the illusion so deeply that they didn't stop to question whether I was truly powerless. One morning, I sat in my wheelchair by the window and watched seagulls fight over a sandwich crust in the parking lot. I smiled. Nature had its own justice, too. The call from Howard came a week later. "It's done," he said. "Filed with the court, validated by a witness. They'll get the notice tomorrow. What's the reaction time, do you think? Depends on how fast they read their mail." That night I barely slept. Not because I was worried, but because for the first time in months, I felt alive. I was no longer waiting. I was moving. The next day, chaos began. Michael called the facility first, his voice tight with panic. "I need to speak with my mother," he said. The nurse handed me the phone. "Mom, did you change the will?" His voice was shaking. "I did," I said plainly. "But why?" You don't understand what this means. The deal, Julia's buyer is ready to close next week." "I know. You can't just, you're sick, Mom. You're not thinking straight." "I've never thought clearer," I said and hung up. Less than 2 hours later, Julia stormed into the facility. She walked past the front desk like she owned the place, high heels clicking with rage. "What have you done?" she hissed, leaning over me. "Do you have any idea what you're ruining?" "Only your plans," I said. Her face twisted. "You're going to give everything to strangers? A bunch of orphan kids and a library? They're more deserving," I said. "And they never lied to me." She stood up, trembling. "You'll regret this. Michael and I. You forged a will. You used my illness to steal what wasn't yours. You don't get to cry about betrayal now." Her mouth opened, but she didn't speak. For once, Julia had no words. Later that evening, I asked the nurse to help me pack. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I said. "Are you sure?" she asked. "You've only just." "I'm stronger now. And I have somewhere to be." I checked out quietly. No grand speech. No confrontation. I left behind a tidy room and a thank you card for Dr. Peters. And I left a note for Julia and Michael, delivered the next morning by Howard. "You took my voice. I took your future." That was all. No threats. No yelling. Just the truth, carved into 10 words like a gravestone for their dreams. They tried to reach me, of course. I ignored the calls. Michael even came to Howard's office, begging to work something out. But there was nothing left to work out. The mansion was already transferred. The bank account was sealed. Their illusion shattered. I watched it all unfold from the window of a rented apartment in a town where no one knew my name. The ocean was still close. The breeze still sweet. And for the first time in years, I was truly perfectly alone, by choice. Freedom is a strange thing when it returns to you. At first, it feels almost too big, like your skin has stretched overnight, and the world around you doesn't quite fit anymore. That's how I felt in that small apartment by the shore. The place was modest, 1 bedroom, creaky floors, mismatched cabinets. But it was mine. Not inherited. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Mine. I paid for it with a quiet bank transfer from the trust Martin and I had set up years ago. The same trust Julia and Michael never knew existed. Funny, the things you learn to keep secret, even from family. My days took on a quiet rhythm. Morning tea, a walk by the coast, sometimes stopping at the local library or sitting on a bench to people watch. I liked the silence. After all the noise of betrayal and legal battles, the quiet was healing. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was strong. I already knew. I had survived the kind of betrayal that leaves scars most people can't see. The kind where the pain doesn't come from strangers, but from the people you once rocked to sleep. But peace never lasts long, does it? It was about a month after I moved when Howard called again. "They've filed a motion," he said. "They're contesting the will." "Of course they are," I replied, not surprised. "They're claiming coercion," he added. "That you were pressured or manipulated into changing it after the stroke. And they think they can prove that. They're reaching. But they're angry. And desperate. They've hired an attorney, someone aggressive. This might get ugly." I sighed. I'm not afraid of ugly. I've seen worse. The next day, I received a thick envelope at my apartment. Court documents. Pages of accusations from my own children. Words like mental unfitness, undue influence, and deteriorating health. Julia had even included old voice recordings of me slurring words after the stroke, trying to paint me as senile. It hurt. Not the legal part, I knew how to handle that, but the personal part. Seeing your own child weaponize your weakest moments is something no mother should ever experience. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell, to throw something. But instead, I poured myself a cup of tea and read every single page. Then I called Howard. "I want to respond," I said. "I thought you might." We prepared our statement carefully. I gathered all the therapy records Dr. Peters had documented, my speech recovery, my physical progress, every test that confirmed my full cognitive function. I wrote a declaration in my own hand, sharp and steady, explaining why I had made the choices I did. And I asked Dr. Peters to testify. "She won't like the spotlight," Howard warned. "She won't have to be in it long," I replied. "Just long enough to remind them the truth still matters." The court date was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Julia and Michael tried a different tactic: sympathy. Julia emailed first. A long, rambling message about how she'd always tried to make me proud, how she was only thinking of the future, how she didn't understand how we'd become so distant. Michael sent a voicemail. "Mom, I miss you. I know we messed up, but maybe we can fix this before it goes too far. We're still family, right?" It was almost convincing, the tone in his voice. Almost. But I remembered the looks they gave each other in that hospital room. The smug way they'd dismissed my protests. The cold confidence when they thought I couldn't fight back. No, I didn't owe them anything, not anymore. The day of the hearing was clear and bright. I wore a navy suit, simple but elegant. The kind I used to wear to court back when people still introduced me as Attorney Eleanor Sharp. I walked into the courtroom with Howard at my side and my spine straight as a ruler. Julia and Michael were already seated at their attorney's table. They looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in presence. Less certain. Julia glanced at me but quickly looked away. Michael offered a weak smile. I didn't return it. The judge was a woman, maybe in her 60s. She looked over her glasses at the files before her, and then at me. "Mrs. Sharp," she said, "you understand the nature of this hearing?" "I do," I answered clearly. "You are here to confirm the validity of the revised will and your capacity at the time of its execution?" "Yes, Your Honor." Howard spoke first, laying out the facts. He presented the timeline, the medical records, the copies of therapy logs. Dr. Peters took the stand next. She explained how strokes affect the body, how recovery is measured, how Eleanor Sharp, me, had passed every cognitive test with clarity. She was more mentally sharp than most of the people making decisions for her, Dr. Peters said, earning a small chuckle from the courtroom. When it was my turn to speak, I stood without hesitation. I may have been silent, I said slowly, letting my words sink in. But I was not gone. I heard every word my children said. Every lie. Every assumption. I watched as they tore through my home and spoke of me like I was already dead. Julia shifted uncomfortably. Michael's head dropped. I changed my will because I no longer believed they would honor what mattered most to me. My values. My legacy. My memory. They wanted money. I wanted meaning. The judge listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she asked only one question. "Do you stand by the decisions in this will?" "Yes," I said, without regret. The hearing ended faster than I expected. The judge needed time to deliberate, she said, but Howard seemed confident. "We did well," he told me outside the courthouse. "I'm not worried about the verdict," I said. "I just wanted them to hear it from me." And I think in that moment I saw something pass over Julia's face. Not regret, not sorrow, but a flicker of understanding. That she hadn't won. That this wasn't just about property or money, it was about principle. And she'd lost it. Days later, the court ruled in my favor. The will was upheld. The donations were secured. The orphanage had already started renovations. The scholarship fund would begin accepting applicants in the fall. Julia and Michael said nothing. No apology. No final plea. Just silence. And somehow, that silence said everything. I returned to my quiet life by the sea, not because I was hiding, but because I had earned it. I spent mornings reading and afternoons walking the beach. I had no regrets. Only peace. But peace, I've learned, is never the end of a story. It's just a pause. And my story? It wasn't finished, not yet. I thought that was where my story ended. A quiet woman in a quiet town, sipping tea beside the sea, having finally reclaimed her dignity and peace. But life has a way of throwing pebbles into still water. Even when you think you've walked away from the battlefield, echoes follow. It began with a knock on my door. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was reading by the window, listening to the soft hum of the waves, when the knock came, light but urgent. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes red-rimmed. "Can I come in?" he asked. For a moment I simply stared. Part of me wanted to say no, to turn away and shut the door on everything he had become. But some small, stubborn corner of my heart, the one that still remembered rocking him to sleep, wouldn't let me. I stepped aside. "Don't drip on the rug," I said, and he gave a weak smile. He sat at the small table by the kitchen, shivering slightly as I poured him a cup of tea. We didn't speak until he took the first sip. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know it doesn't change anything. But I needed to say it." I studied his face. He looked older, tired, like someone who had finally realized the weight of their choices. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he added quickly. I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately. And you. And everything." "You lied," I said, voice even. "You watched your sister forge a will. You stood by while I was silenced." "I know." His hands trembled as he set down the cup. "I was weak. I wanted things easy. I let Julia take the lead because she always seemed to know what she was doing. And when I realized how far we'd gone, it felt too late to turn back." "It wasn't," I said. "But you chose not to." He nodded. "I just wanted you to know I regret it. Truly." Silence settled between us again. The kind that comes after a storm, when everything is wet and broken but somehow clearer. I didn't forgive him that day. Not completely. But I didn't send him away either. I let him finish his tea. I let him sit in the warmth of the kitchen, if only for a while. And when he left, I gave him a hug. Not the kind that says everything's okay, but the kind that says I see you. Julia never came. She sent a single email weeks later, short and cold. "You win. Enjoy your charity house." I didn't reply. I hadn't won, not in the way she meant. Winning wasn't watching my children unravel. It wasn't proving a point in court or reclaiming a deed. Winning was remembering who I was, after being made to feel like nothing. And I remembered. I began volunteering at the orphanage I'd donated the mansion to. The staff had transformed Cedarvale with such care. The grand halls echoed with laughter now. Children filled the garden Martin had once tended. The old library was reborn as a study space, with shelves donated from local bookstores. The first time I walked back into the house, I cried. Not from sadness, but from a strange mix of grief and gratitude. The memories were still there, Martin's voice, the smell of holiday dinners, the sound of Michael's childhood giggle. But they weren't ghosts anymore. They were seeds, and something new had grown from them. One little girl named Clara followed me around for weeks. She had a mop of curly hair and a habit of asking endless questions. "Did you used to live here?" she asked me one afternoon as I helped her tie her shoes. "I did," I replied. "A long time ago." "Did you like it?" "I loved it." "Why did you leave?" I paused. "Because someone else needed it more than I did." She considered that, then nodded solemnly. "I think you're magic," she said, then skipped off. Maybe I was. Or maybe I just finally remembered that I didn't need to be anyone's shadow. I didn't need to buy love with money or silence. I just needed to be myself. Dr. Peters came to visit once, just to see how I was. We sat in the garden behind the orphanage, sharing lemonade and stories. "You did something most people don't," she said. "You took your pain and made it into something beautiful." "I didn't do it for beauty," I said. "I did it because I was tired of being erased." "Same thing," she smiled. Howard kept in touch, though less frequently now that the legal storm had passed. He still called me Sharp out of habit, and I still called him Belle. And we laughed like we were back in the office again. He told me that Julia had put her house on the market, downsizing, he suspected. Michael had taken a job with a small company upstate. It seemed they were learning, slowly, how to stand on their own. I didn't wish them harm. But I no longer carried the burden of hoping they'd change. That part of my heart had grown quiet. The scholarship launched that fall. Dozens of young people applied. Bright kids with big dreams and small wallets. I read every essay. I cried over more than a few. And I thought of Martin, who always believed that a person's worth wasn't in what they kept, but in what they gave. Now, years later, I still walk that same shoreline every morning. The air smells of salt and promise. The waves tell their endless stories. And I, Eleanor Sharp, have mine. I tell it not to make people feel sorry or angry, or even proud. I tell it because there are women out there, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, who are made to feel small, who are told they've had their time, who are shoved to the edges of their own lives. This story is for them. Because dignity isn't something you're given. It's something you take back. And revenge? Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to burn things down or break things apart. Sometimes the best revenge is rising in silence. Standing tall. Writing your own ending. I did. And I'm still here. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. But some memories, no matter how many sunsets pass, stay vivid, as if the wound never quite closes. After my visit from Michael and that brief, bitter email from Julia, I truly believed things had settled. That maybe they would go on with their lives, and I would go on with mine. We'd be distant, sure. Estranged, probably. But stable. I was wrong. It started with a phone call from Howard. I was pruning roses in the community garden behind the orphanage, hands dirty, heart light. The phone buzzed in my apron pocket. "Eleanor," Howard said, skipping the pleasantries. "Julia's made a move." I stood up, wiping my hands. "What kind of move?" "She's filed a defamation claim." I blinked. "Defamation? For what?" "She's claiming that your public actions, donating the house, contesting the forged will, involving the court, damaged her career and social standing. She's saying it's hurt her reputation in the real estate world." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A dry, stunned laugh that escaped my lips before I could stop it. "She forged my will, tried to sell my house out from under me, and I'm the one who damaged her?" "She's grasping at straws," Howard said. "But she's serious. She's got a lawyer from Boston now. They're trying to paint you as vindictive." "I was protecting what was mine," I said. "And what was never theirs to begin with." "I know," he said. "But the court might still hear it. Especially if they think there's a public image issue involved." I took a deep breath, looking out over the rows of lavender and tulips swaying gently in the wind. The very thought that Julia would try to drag me back into court after everything left a sour taste in my mouth. "Do I have to respond?" I asked. "You can't ignore it," Howard said. "But you have every right to defend yourself." "I don't want to fight her anymore," I admitted. "But you will," he said gently. "Because you've come too far to let her rewrite the story now." The next few days felt like slipping back into old shoes I hoped I'd thrown out. Howard began preparing documents. I gave another statement. We gathered character references from the orphanage staff, Dr. Peters, and even a few old friends from my legal days. None of them had known the full story before. Now they did, and their support surprised me. "You did what most people are too scared to do," one friend told me. "You stood up when it would have been easier to disappear." The news of the lawsuit reached the local papers, not front-page news but enough to stir whispers. Some people took Julia's side, others mine, but I didn't engage. I kept volunteering. I kept walking the beach. I kept my dignity. And then came the letter. It was hand-delivered to the orphanage. Not by a courier, not by a clerk, but by Julia herself. I wasn't there when she came. Clara, the little girl who still shadowed me like a second heartbeat, handed it to me that afternoon. "A fancy lady gave this to Miss Carla at the front desk," she said. "Said it was for you." I took the envelope, heart already racing. It was thick, sealed in red wax. Unnecessary flair, very much Julia's style. I waited until I was home, alone, before opening it. Inside was a single-page letter, handwritten. "Eleanor, since you refused to listen to reason in public, I'll try one last time in private. I never wanted things to get this ugly. But you pushed us. You humiliated me. You destroyed my credibility. You took the one thing that should have been ours, our family legacy, and gave it away to strangers. If you drop everything now, the scholarship, the deed transfer, the press, I'll walk away. No court. No headlines. Just peace. But if you continue this, I promise I won't stop until I have the last word. You always taught me how to win. I guess I listened better than you thought. Julia." I folded the letter slowly. Set it on the table. Then I sat in the silence for a long time. She still didn't understand. Julia didn't see people. She saw pieces. Property, status, control. She didn't see the children laughing in the halls of Cedarvale now. She didn't see the applicants writing essays about becoming doctors and teachers through the scholarship fund. She didn't see me, her mother, not as a woman who had sacrificed, endured, survived, but as a threat to be handled. She hadn't learned anything. I didn't respond to the letter. Instead, I gave it to Howard. He smiled grimly. "It'll look good in court. Threats never sit well with judges." A week before the hearing, I got another surprise. This one from someone I never expected. Michael showed up again. This time it was the orphanage garden. I was planting marigolds. He came quietly, no umbrella, hands in his coat pockets. "I heard about the lawsuit," he said. I nodded, not getting up. "I told her it was a bad idea," he continued. "But Julia doesn't listen to anyone." I didn't respond. "Not yet. She's not doing well," he added after a moment. Her firm dropped her. Her name's mud in the business. People found out everything. Truth has a way of crawling out, I said. I'm not here to defend her, he said quickly. I guess I wanted to say that you didn't deserve any of this. I finally looked up at him. No, I didn't. He sighed. Do you hate us? Hating you would mean you still matter more than you do, I said. But I'm done carrying you both. Done paying for your mistakes. You'll live with your choices. I'll live with mine. He looked down at the flowers. You always liked marigolds. I still do. He nodded, turned, and walked away. The court dismissed Julia's lawsuit in under an hour. The judge called it baseless, retaliatory, and without merit. Her attorney didn't even argue. There was no public apology, no admission of guilt, but it didn't matter. Her silence after the ruling was louder than any apology could have been. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about it. But I did sleep better that night. For the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about courtrooms or hospital beds or Julia's sharp words. I dreamed about Cedar Vale, full of children, laughter echoing off the high ceilings. The world didn't change overnight. Julia faded from public view. Michael took a job 2 towns over. I continued working at the orphanage, reading stories, helping with homework, planting marigolds and tulips in the soil Martin once walked. And slowly, I started thinking less about revenge and more about legacy. What it really means. It's not in buildings or bank accounts or last names. It's in the lives we touch. The people we lift. The truth we fight for, even when our voices shake, or when we lose them altogether. I may have been silenced once, but now my voice is louder than ever. And I speak for no one but myself. It's funny, the things that begin to matter again when the dust finally settles. After all the noise, the courtrooms, the letters, and the silence, I found myself focusing on the small things. The creak of the porch swing, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the way the wind tangled the chimes outside my window. Life, once blurred by pain and betrayal, was starting to come back into focus. It wasn't loud or grand. It was soft, gentle, mine. I kept volunteering at the orphanage every week. Some days I helped with homework. Other days I simply sat in the garden and listened to the children chatter about school and dreams. I never spoke about Julia or Michael. The story of what happened was mine, and I didn't want it to bleed into theirs. They didn't need to carry my past. They deserved something clean, something better. One afternoon, Clara sat beside me, watching me sort seed packets. "Why don't you live here if it used to be your house?" she asked. I smiled. Because someone else needed it more. But don't you miss it? I thought for a moment. Sometimes. But it's better like this. Things change. Sometimes they have to. She didn't fully understand, but that was okay. One day she might. Or maybe she'd never have to learn what it meant to be betrayed by your own blood. Maybe that was the real victory. Still, something in me couldn't fully rest. Not yet. Because one truth remained buried deep in the silence. Julia had never looked me in the eye. Not since the hearing, not since the letter, not since she tried to drag me through the courts again. I told myself it didn't matter. That I didn't need closure from someone who had made her choices so clear. But I would be lying if I said the door inside me was fully closed. That door cracked open again with another unexpected call. From Rosa, a mutual friend I hadn't seen in years. She'd once been part of my old book club, long before everything fell apart. She called me one morning as I was writing thank you notes for the scholarship donors. "Eleanor," she said, "I wasn't sure if I should call, but I saw Julia at the clinic." I sat still, pen frozen in my hand. "What clinic?" "The outpatient counseling center. I volunteer there now." She didn't see me, but I heard her name. My first reaction wasn't anger or hope. It was confusion. "She's in counseling?" I asked. Rosa hesitated. I don't know why, but she looked tired. Different. "Thought you should know." I thanked her, then sat in silence for a long while. Later that evening, I went for a walk by the coast. The sky was a soft, faded blue. The kind Martin used to call good-thinking weather. And I thought. About Julia. About forgiveness. About the difference between justice and revenge. I had never needed Julia to be perfect. I just needed her to be honest. And she never had been. Not even once. Not when she signed the false will. Not when she said I was confused. Not when she smiled through the lies. Still, Rosa's words stayed with me. Maybe finally Julia was confronting herself. And that changed something in me. So I wrote a letter. Just a short one. No drama. No accusations. "Julia, Rosa told me where you've been. I'm not writing to open old wounds. I'm writing to tell you that I hope, if you're trying to change, you keep going. You don't owe me an apology, not now. Not if it's only out of guilt. But if you ever want to speak the truth, just once, I'll listen. Mother. I didn't know if she'd reply. I mailed it without expectation. It felt like setting something down that I had carried too long. Weeks passed. No word. I let it go. Then one morning, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. My name, written in Julia's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I made tea, sat in my reading chair, and waited until I could face whatever was inside. There were only 2 sentences. You were right. I wasn't just cruel, I was scared. I thought power would keep me safe. It didn't. That was it. No apology. No excuses. But it was honest. For once, painfully honest. I read those lines again and again. Not with joy, not with tears. Just stillness. Because maybe finally, the story had cracked open for her too. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on building forward. The scholarship expanded the following year thanks to a generous donor. A former student who'd won in the first round had graduated early and been accepted into medical school. She came to visit me, brought flowers, thanked me with tears in her eyes. Your help changed everything, she said. No, I told her. You did the work. I just made sure the door was open. The orphanage started new programs, music, theater, even coding. Cedar Vale, once a quiet, fading mansion, had become a home bursting with energy. Every wall echoed with purpose. Sometimes I still thought about the past. The woman I had been. The mother. The wife. The lawyer. The patient in the hospital bed who couldn't speak, couldn't move, whose children had already decided she was better silenced. But that wasn't the end of my story. That was the beginning. Because I had found my voice again. Not to shout. Not to shame. But to speak. To choose. To build. To be. And though Julia and I might never share a table again, I knew I'd broken the cycle. That her daughter, if she had won someday, would not inherit the same pattern. That maybe, in some quiet way, my silence had become something more powerful than noise. It had become a stand. I sometimes visit Cedar Vale alone now, after hours, when the children are asleep and the staff is winding down. I walk the halls slowly. I touch the banister Martin built. I pause in the sunroom, where we once read together, his feet up, mine tucked under a blanket. It's still home, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. That's the beauty of it. It belongs to the future now. And I do too. Some stories don't end with a final word. They just reach a place of peace. That's what I've come to understand. Not all wrongs are righted. Not all wounds are healed. But if you can look in the mirror and say, I did not become like the people who tried to silence me, then you've already won more than revenge could ever give you. Now, as I sit here writing this, I'm 61. It's been 3 years since that day I found my voice again in the courtroom. 3 years since Julia tried to take back what she'd lost, and Michael came to me with a shaky apology in his eyes. 3 years since I gave away a house, but kept my self-worth. The world around me is still changing. So am I. I still live in my little apartment near the sea. I never moved back into a house, though I could have afforded one. Something about this space, humble, full of light, quiet, has felt more like home than any mansion ever did. I keep fresh flowers on the windowsill, a small photo of Martin by the kettle, and shelves full of books I've collected over the years. My life is simple now. It's not without pain, but it's without pretense. I still walk to Cedar Vale every Friday. The orphanage is always full of life. Sometimes I read to the children. Other times I just sit and listen as they talk about their futures, dreams of becoming astronauts, teachers, veterinarians. They remind me that life moves forward, even when we think it's stopped. They have no idea who I used to be. To them, I'm just Eleanor, the lady who brings homemade cookies and always knows the right story to read. A few months ago, something unexpected happened. Clara, the little girl who had once followed me around like my own shadow, was adopted by a couple from the next town over. I should have felt nothing but happiness, and I did mostly. But when she hugged me goodbye, her tiny arms wrapped around my waist and her voice whispered, "Thank you for loving me like a mom," something cracked open in me. Not broken, just open. When she left, I cried harder than I had in years. Not out of grief. Out of release. Because that's what I'd needed, all along. Not a house, not an apology, not even revenge. Just a reminder that I could still love. That I could still be loved, even after everything. I've spoken to Michael once since then. He called on my birthday, nervous, stammering through the first few minutes. He told me his job was going well. That he was seeing someone who worked in community development. that he was trying to be better. I listened. I didn't offer forgiveness, but I offered space. You don't have to say anything, he said. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. That's something, I told him. And it was. Julia never replied again. Her letter, the last one, was the closest thing to truth I'd ever received from her. I've made peace with the silence. Not every relationship is meant to be repaired. Some are meant to teach you what boundaries look like, what strength sounds like, what it feels like to walk away without regret. And yet I hope, quietly, softly, without expectation. Maybe one day she'll walk through the doors of Cedar Vale and see what I built. Not to spite her, but to free myself. Maybe she'll stand in that sunroom and remember the mother who once made hot cocoa after every storm, who read to her at night, who taught her how to write her name in cursive. And maybe then, just maybe, she'll understand. But if not, that's all right too. Because I didn't do all this to change her. I did it to remember me. Martin would have been proud. Of the scholarship, yes, and the orphanage and the children I've helped. But more than that, I think he would have been proud that I didn't let them erase me. That I didn't disappear just because they wanted to pretend I was already gone. When I close my eyes now, I see him sometimes. Not as a ghost, but as a memory that brings peace. I see him standing on the back porch of Cedar Vale, coffee in one hand, newspaper in the other, calling out to me as I prune the rose bushes. Ellie, he used to say, you always know where to cut and where to let things grow. I didn't understand it then. But I do now. Some things you trim, others you give space to bloom. And some, you pull out by the roots so something better can take its place. That's what I did with my life. I cut away the betrayal, the silence, the lies. I let go of the anger. I gave room to the love, the service, the small, quiet joys that filled me in ways money and titles never could. Now, as I write this, I think about the women who might read it someday. Women like me. Women who gave and gave and gave until they were left with nothing. Women who thought they had to stay small to be safe. Women who were told they were past their prime, too old to matter, too quiet to fight. This story is for them. To remind them that it's never too late to stand. That silence is not surrender. That you can lose everything, your health, your home, your children's affection, and still rise. Not through rage. Through truth. Through action. Through grace. The mansion that was taken from me is now filled with light. Children sleep peacefully in the rooms that once echoed with the tension of family secrets. The house I built with love is now giving love back into the world. That's a better legacy than anything Julia or Michael could have inherited. And me? I'm just a woman with a past and a pen. A woman who was betrayed, but not broken. Who was forgotten, but not gone. Who was silenced, but not finished. I am Eleanor Sharp. And I am still here.